Good afternoon. This is Carl Nofuente, the director of the HIFE College Planning Program. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar training. I'm going to cover what we call frequently asked questions regarding our program. The reason why I'm looking to cover this today is I find that even as consultants get certified and they go through some information, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, or they're not quite sure on how to answer questions. And so I just want to make sure that we equip you. A lot of times, you can introduce a program fairly simple, but what happens is when people start gaining interest, you'll know if they gain interest by the questions they ask. And what I see is so many consultants, they fear, or they have this fear of answering questions because they don't know if they can answer it quite efficiently, or if they can't answer it properly. So we want to make sure that you're aware of the type of questions that are being asked so that you are better prepared, as well as just to familiarize yourself with the program. If there's something wrong with the screen size, right, I believe it's a setting on your end. If anyone else can double check that you can see my screen. If it's getting cut off, it may be on your end. Can you just double check your resolution? Because I did this last time, it should be fine. Okay, great. So as I was saying is, we want to make sure that you're better prepared. And the best way to be better prepared as you market the program or talk to people about the program is just familiarizing yourself with information. I will say this, and I'll stress it till I'm blue in the face so that you get the point. You don't have to be the expert in college planning. You don't have to be the know-it-all and assume as if you have to do the coaching job. What you have to be good at, and not even so much good, what you just have to be efficient in is answering questions. And if you don't know the answers, finding how to get the answers is what's really important. And so I'm going to cover the frequently asked questions regarding our program. There's general questions and there's questions regarding coaching. So we'll talk about the general questions first. So when you think about our program, there's general questions people ask about HIFE College Planning or even HIFE Education Planning Canada. And so these questions are pretty much consistent that we see across the board. People are always going to ask, when is the best time to enroll? And whether it's your prospective clients or it's you, it's a good idea for you to understand when is the actual best time to enroll. So rather being asked the question or someone proposes to you, well, maybe not now, let them enroll in their junior, senior year. If you know already automatically when the best time to enroll is, it's easy for you to have the conversation of enrolling students well prior to their junior or senior year. So we say the best time to enroll is second semester, 8th grade, right? That's the earliest you can enroll. The earlier the better, because it allows a coach to have more time helping the students. A lot of the information or the coaching and guidance and assistance that takes place isn't something that can happen overnight. It's a development. It's in stages, developmental stages, I should say, because what happens is as we start to get to know the students and we start helping them understand who they are, what they want to do, then the planning constantly keeps evolving. And so as we know their students' education and career goals, the longer they stay in the program, we're able to better refine that, help them understand it. And so we want to make sure that the earlier they start in the program, the better it is. I've seen, and I'll give you the best example I can give, and it's with my personal student. Most recently, I think some of you may have heard me say this before in my recent webinars. I enrolled a student back in our program about 2.5, 3 years ago. And when they came in our program, they came in towards their beginning of their sophomore year. They're now a senior. So actually the end of their freshman year, end of their freshman. So it's about 2.5 years. And when they entered our program, one of the things they were looking at were many things. They were looking at, should I do this area of education? Should I focus on this career? I want to go to this school. They were very adamant about a certain school they wanted to go into. And lo and behold, because they've been in our program for, a couple of years, we've been able to refine exactly what the student's looking for in terms of college, in terms of educational goals, career goals. Long story short of this is she most recently received from a private university out in New Jersey, 85% scholarship, which is the 85% tuition and fees for scholarship for that university. That university costs about $37,000 a year. So her scholarship is equivalent to about $30,000 and some change, close to $31,000 per year. But a lot of that is because we got to know the student. And part of getting to know the student is one of the things that the parents wanted us to work with a student on was having them excel in a sport, which happened to be at that time volleyball or softball, because they heard from a friend of a friend of a friend that their daughter got a scholarship for volleyball, for softball. And so that was a route they were trying to go. And some of you know my story. I always mention bowling, and there's a great opportunity with bowling in terms of getting scholarships. I encouraged her, because she was in a youth league and just doing it as a hobby. I encouraged her to look at that sport more seriously, because we were able to guide her. She was getting coaching from someone that I knew personally in the bowling league and in the bowling center. We were able to help develop her, and along with a coaching program. And so the scholarship that she recently received was an NCAA Division I scholarship. 85% tuition and fees are paid through that scholarship, all through the sport of bowling. But see, if we didn't get her into the program early on, and if I didn't have that chance to talk to her 2.5 years ago, her parents would have more likely persisted in having her pursue softball or volleyball. But I kept insisting as a consultant that she needs to consider this sport, because it can be one of her ways to obtain financial aid. And her parents were in disbelief, because they make multiple six figures. And now you look today, they're very much happy. So the best time to enroll a student is early on. It gives us some time to understand who they are, what their hobbies are, what they like to do, and really do adequate research and find out what's the possibilities of those things translating into either getting into colleges, turning those into scholarship opportunities. So the earlier, the better. Second question, or another question that comes up frequently regarding our program is it too late to enroll my student if they're already a senior in high school? You'll probably get this a lot more times than not, because when you're talking to families, especially if they have older kids and they happen to be seniors, they're rushing around. They're frantically panicking, applying for colleges, applying for FAFSA, applying for financial aid. And even till today, we've mentioned so many times throughout this year that FAFSA has changed and you got to file FAFSA early. There's so many seniors still today that it amazes me that they still haven't completed FAFSA yet, and we're already in the month of December. So when we talk about as seniors, is it too late? It's never too late. However, you have to understand, if the primary reason to enroll them is to receive financial aid, then we would say this wouldn't be a good fit for them, because a lot of the aid that you could possibly receive takes years, if not many months of planning to ensure that we're on the right track. Just like the student example I gave, that was 2.5 years in the making. See, if they decided 2.5 years ago they weren't going to pursue that sport, then we needed to figure something else out. But I also know, because I do a lot of data research, a lot of fact finding, that the likelihood if she actually excelled in that sport, which she did, and I gave her, when I talked to them, I said, look, for you to get a chance to get a scholarship in that sport, you got to be pushing around 190, 200 average. And so when she started out in our program in the youth bowling league as well, her average was well below like 120, 130. And so she worked on it, constantly worked on it. But again, if they come into our program their senior year, we don't have enough time to make adjustments. So you have to just look at it. If they're able to get the help that we talk about, and I'll mention here shortly, then I think it would be good for them to enroll. But again, I do want to be clear, it's never too late, because a lot of seniors are confused. They're undecided. They're not sure of their choices. Our coaches still can guide them. The only key thing about that is we want to make sure they're not coming under the premise or enrolling under the premise that they're going to receive financial aid. What they're going to receive is guidance, coaching, help with applying for colleges, scholarships, etc., making sure things are done properly. That's what they're going to get assistance on. And so what you have to look at is our program helps in 3 specific areas. The first area is we help them determine a career path by defining their interests, their skills, and work values. That's where we can help them narrow down their choices, narrow down their searches. Then we work with them on the planning, selection, application process for college, and then as well as help them search for different scholarships that are available to them. So remember, these 3 things are the areas that we focus in on. Excuse me. These are the 3 areas that we help them focus in on. And so, yes, could we possibly help them find money? The answer is yes, but it requires planning. It requires dedication of the student. They got to put some work into it. And as you can see, and as you may have heard recently, there are many students that are now reaching their senior year that they're seeing these results. But part of that was they were in our program for 2-3 years. And so we've had the proper amount of time to help plan this thing or plan these things out. so that they're able to get this. Just remember that if they come into the program or they're looking to come into the program as a senior, it's not that we can't help. It's just if they're looking for for financial reasons, this is not the program for them. Also asked quite often, is there any benefit to enrolling a student that is currently in college? It's going to depend on the student. And what I mean by that is this. If you know the statistics, the 25 to 50% of the students that enter college are undecided. 75 to 80% switch their major at least once, on average 3 times. So if you know that, then that means, or that translates to a student's potentially going to be in college, not for 4 years, but more like 5 or 6 years. And so if they're looking for that guidance or helping them or having someone help them focus so that they're pursuing the right profession, the right education, the right degree, and ensuring that it's the right college, then I believe coaching is going to work for them. You know, you have to look at it in the sense that what we're trying to do is help the student find what we believe is their ultimate optimal career, where it's the one that is best suited for them, one that they're going to enjoy, love, and do well in. And so even if they're in college, we can help them do job search, build their resume, help them understand how to prepare for work, help them understand how to develop their interviewing skills. So even if they're in college, there's still a lot of benefit to them. Again, you just have to look at what I said earlier, similar to like seniors. If the primary reason to enroll into the program is for financial reasons, this program isn't really going to be, or they're not going to be a good fit for our program. So just keep that in mind. So we can still help students that are currently in college. We can help them transition into their master's, their PhD, etc. But as we're considering those students, we're going to look at it a little bit more in detail, just to ensure that we're going to be able to provide them the services and it's going to be of value to that family before we enroll them. Is there any guarantee that we'll find additional funding? Again, a lot of people, what they're looking at, as you hear me do my webinars, one of the biggest concerns people have with college is always going to be cost. No matter what you say, no matter what you try to pitch to them or sell to them or even say to them, anytime a parent thinks about college, first thing they think about is cost. And so you got to understand that. But what I always tell every parent is you can't control costs. All you can do is work hard, save hard, and hopefully saving in the right place. But along with that, what you have to understand is there is no way any organization, including ours, can guarantee you that we'll find you additional funding. What we can do is, with proper guidance, coaching, and assistance, is help ensure your son or daughter graduates on time by helping them find the best suited major, degree, career, college, etc., so that instead of graduating in 6 years, they graduate, which our studies, our statistics show, our students are graduating within 5 years. So that's where you're going to save some money in terms of cost. So again, we can't guarantee a student will be awarded scholarships. There's no way we can control that. Only the organizations that award those monies have the control. Our coaches, what we can do is assist them through the application process, help them understand what is required, help them understand how to apply effectively. And what I mean by applying effectively, some of the most common mistakes in filling out scholarship applications is not completing it or leaving blank. So we can review those things. We can review essays. So there's all these things that we can help them do. And even if the student is in college, this is stuff that we can help them with as well. Now, be mindful though, even if we're helping them, whether you're in high school, whether you're in college, and we're helping you apply for scholarships, that doesn't mean that you'll get awarded. And you have to know when it comes to scholarships and trying to find money, it is a numbers game more than anything. And so students have to be actively applying. Well, first I should say actively willing. They got to be willing to apply, but they really have to apply ongoingly. They should be doing anywhere from 2 to 3, if not 4 applications every single month to ensure their chances of being awarded money. So this is a process that we can take on as early as high school and even through college, but it's something that the student has to be willing to commit to. What we found in most cases is the average student doesn't want to do that because they don't want to add more work. But there is a process on how to develop or how to win scholarships. Part of that is understanding how to develop a portfolio, understanding how to refine your writing skills. And those are things our coaches can work with you on. But again, if you're in our program early on, it just will be added value to you because we've had time to work with you over the years. If you come into our program in the latter part, senior year of high school, freshman, and your skills, writing skills, or the way you apply for skills isn't up to par, it takes time to develop that. So just be mindful that there aren't any guarantees. All we can do as coaches is help better position you, help review these things, help you understand how to be in the best position possible when you're looked at on paper. Okay. Is a student required to renew? You'll see that quite a bit too. I tell every family student isn't required to renew. However, it would be in your best interest to. Think about it this way. When your students start to excel, right, in anything, you don't stop coaching. You continue to get them coaching. Matter of fact, you start looking at better ways to coach them because you want them to increase their skill set, enhance what they're doing. And so if they're improving, and even if they're not improving, and that could be in part because the student isn't actively engaged. But I will say this, much of the benefit or much of the outcome and success that you see from our students today is because they've been in our program for 2 or 3 years. And so though the student isn't required to renew, I always paint this picture, and you'll hear me when I do my webinars. I tell them you get more value for your money the longer you stay in the program. If you stay in the program for a year, it will cost you $2,500. If you stay in the program for 4 years, it will cost $3,400. So for 48 months worth of coaching, it costs $3,400. You get more value for your money the longer you stay in the program. And along with that, I think it's just a great investment to invest $300 to have peace of mind that you have somebody you can reach out to at any given time for those 12 months just to ensure that things are being done properly and that someone can review information for you, or that your son or daughter has somebody they can talk to that's going to coach them. And again, this is not to take anything away from educators, people in the educational system, but they're limited on time. And so if your son or daughters can't get a scheduled time with them, or it's not adequate amount of time, then quite honestly, they're overlooked or they're neglected. Here, a $300 investment, you have somebody, a personal coach that has 20 plus years in experience in higher education that can guide your children. So it isn't required. However, I've always recommend my students prior to enrolling, I tell them up front what a 4-year cost is, so the parents are well prepared, not thinking about investing $2,500. They're thinking about investing $3,400. So it's again about how you propose the enrollment fee and the renewal fee. I propose it all together. I say, 4 years worth of coaching is $3,400, $2,500 is 1 year's worth of coaching. So I'm always looking to encourage them to do longer rather than shorter. The other questions we see regarding our program is, what's the advantage of our program over high school counselors? It's not to say there's an advantage, and I want to be clear, because high school counselors and educators, they do their very best to help the kids out. I mean, they go into that field because they have a passion to educate and help the youth out. The challenge we see is that many of them are underpaid, overworked, and not appreciated. And so it's hard to be in that type of environment and really, really help all the students out. You end up wanting to be very selective, or you end up having to be very selective because you just don't have the time. And so what you'll see, and again, it's not so much that, these educators aren't doing their best, or these high school counselors aren't trying their best. It's just they're limited. And so what you have to see in their perspective is, at the same time, at the end of the day, their goal is to see these students graduate high school. And it's not to say that they don't want them to go to college, but the realities are, in that system, if graduation rates are low, guess what happens? Funding ends up getting cut. When funding gets cut, jobs get cut. And so the goal is to increase graduation rates, overall high school graduation rates. And then secondary to that is to get them into college. Hence why, if you look at the data and the statistics, you see the counselors out there, over half of them say they spend less than 20% of their time in preparing these kids to college. And which is interesting, because I recently did a study when I was I was looking at some different stats when I was in Vegas, and I found that there's a good percentage, almost half of the students that enter college actually enter college unprepared, meaning they're taking remedial classes. In my opinion, unnecessary classes. These are things that should have been addressed in high school. And the best example I can give you is this. I know someone personally, when they came to him, it was a little bit too late to get into our program just because of the situation, but the student was trying to get into college, and their route to college, just based on their situation, was community college. And so you'd think it's an easy way to get into, to start college, but for this student, unfortunately, it wasn't. Because why? The classes that were recommended for the student to take in high school were just to help him graduate high school. They weren't designed to help him get into college. And that's what amazes me, because the community college said, look, we'll take you on, but you have to take like 3 or 4 different remedial classes because you didn't take the necessary classes in high school to be accepted here. And so that, in my opinion, is like wasted money. And so it's not to take anything away. Again, I want to stress this against counselors. It's just their focus is a little bit different. So within our program is designed not to just help you graduate high school. It's really to help you get into college, get a higher education, and ultimately find a career that's better suited for you. So we'll help you deal with FAFSA, college applications, college selection, reevaluation letters, assessments, career guidance. Much of that your counselors may not feel comfortable dealing with, or may not have the answers to your questions pertaining to those things. Our coaches do, because they work in a higher educational system. And along with that, we train them ongoingly to be aware of all the changes. So there are some advantages, again, of our program that you can take a benefit from that you may not be able to get in your local high school counselor. Okay. What if the parents want to enroll their student, but he or she's not willing or lacks commitment? Well, I'll say this. If a student lacks commitment and they want to be in the program, please don't enroll them into the program. No matter how much the parent says, sign them up anyways, I'll make them do the work. They still won't do any work. I say this much: only enroll the student based on the following conditions. Enroll the student that wants to enroll him or herself, meaning they actually seek it out, they're looking to be involved and they're excited to be involved. They show a desire and commitment to work for their future, and they're willing to spend some time in the CUDA program and working with our coach, communicating with our coach ongoingly. See, coaching is effective when it's a two-way communication. It's not effective if our coaches just communicate, but the students are unresponsive. And so a lot of times, students, they want to enroll themselves, they're committed to do work, but the one thing that they need to learn, and maybe through the program they'll develop the skill, is learning to be responsive. So when people respond to you, you got to know how to respond back. And so part of that takes time if you don't already have that skill set, but that's something that is a valuable skill set to have in the future. But they got to be open to communicating with our coaches. If they don't have these things, then no matter how much a parent wants the program, I don't believe the program is going to work for the student and the family the way it's intended to. So be mindful of that. Make sure when you're sitting down with families, the most important person at those meetings, in my opinion, isn't so much the payer. It's more of who's the participant, which is a student, the person that's getting coaching. Where's their, you have to check their mindset, so to speak. Where's their mind at in regards to being involved in this program? If they're not really going to be present and want to do this, then it's hard to see any success. So make sure that the student has commitment and they're willing to do work and they're coachable. Now, regarding questions about the coaching process, so those are just general questions about our program. Much of those questions are going to be asked very frequently. If you can understand how to answer them or talk about them and be a little bit more fluid, one thing it will do is increase your confidence. Second, it'll show people, or at least get the perception to people, that you know what you're talking about, and they'll feel a lot more comfortable in getting in business with you in terms of enrolling their kids, and they won't see the $2,500 much of an issue. A lot of times, in my opinion, what I've seen, especially with myself in the beginning days, much of the issue of the $2,500 of the cost was because the way I explained things. I take full responsibility for myself that I wasn't as well equipped, or I didn't talk about it the way that I believe it should be talked about today. And so a lot of people didn't have that belief or confidence in the program, and it's because the way I came off. So familiarize yourself with this information so you're better equipped, okay? So these are general questions regarding the coaching process. Who are our coaches and what are their qualifications? You're going to get this a lot, okay? So what you want to make sure that you're letting everyone know is that all our coaches, they're not just at random. They are interviewed. They go through a process. They're interviewed by our Dean of Education. Matter of fact, she's worked with many of them at some point in her career when she was in the higher educational system. So she knows them on a personal level. She knows their work ethic. And a lot of the coaches that we have are referred to us by other professionals in higher education. And so not only they have the years of experience in higher education, but they're also trained internally from our organizations. Now, I know some of you have questions to the chat line. I will try to address those. Matter of fact, I'll address them towards the end if that's okay, so that I don't get sidetracked, but I will address those towards the end. So regarding our coaches, again, they have 20 plus years in higher education experience. They are highly experienced professionals. They come from the college or university levels. Many of them worked as professors, admissions, financial aid office. Some of them were even working as career advisors, academic advisors. So they understand how to work with students at many different levels. What's most important is they understand how to work with college level students, which are pretty much these students that are high school. That's what they're going to be, is college level students. So we don't, excuse me. So our coaches know how to better prepare them, as they've already worked with those type of students over 20 some years. So our coaches are well qualified. And remember, the Institute, they vet our coaches. They do their own internal background check, and they train them as well. So our coaches are very much qualified to work with your students. How often will the coach communicate with a student? You know, we say that they'll communicate with a coach. They'll communicate with a student as often as needed. We do not actually set any limits on how much time or how often a coach will spend with a student. But when I say that, we got to be mindful. Okay, we got to be mindful that that doesn't mean the coach doesn't call them every day, every week. I will say our coaches are required to communicate with a student at a minimum twice a month, and then they send up follow-ups. But our coaches actually, I see consistently, they frequently communicate with the families, especially depending on the responses. Like if we send out a communication today, family responds, coach will respond. If they respond to that communication, coach will respond to that communication. So what ends up happening is this, is the more frequent the student and family communicates, the more frequent the coach communicates. And so what I tell every student, and I'll tell you as consultants, as you enroll students, encourage them to communicate with the coach as frequent as possible. Make it an open dialogue. The coaching only gets better if there's open communication. And see, I say this because even if our coaches are required to communicate with you on a minimum basis, if you don't respond to those communications, we can't really become very effective in coaching, because we don't know and we cannot read what's going on in your mind if you understand what we're communicating to you or not. So you can have the coach contact the family as frequent, or they will contact the family as frequent or as often as needed. Even then, if a parent or student requests for a phone call or even a Skype, a Zoom webinar session, that can be accommodated just according to the coach's schedule. I know we have a student currently in the program, a great coach. I mean, they've been very, very accommodating with his family. The first month or so, they've been able to meet with them on a little more frequent basis than normal. Part of that is because the coach understands the student has some challenges. So those are things that our coaches take into consideration. But again, we'll do what we can within reason to make sure that we're communicating with them as often as needed. All right. Is there a limit on how many times a coach or parent, a student or parent, have access to the coach? There isn't any limitation. So we don't say you can only talk to the coach once, twice, or only when they communicate. If at any time a student or parent has a concern or question, encourage them to contact the coach. Matter of fact, when they contact the coach, what I encourage the students to do is contact the coach and CC the consultant, so that we as consultants can be aware of the situation, and if needed, that we can step in. Because sometimes some coaches, they when they get an email response, it may be like on a today, like a Friday, okay? And so we typically give the coaches 48 to 72 hours to respond, but there may be some urgency. And so if we see as consultants it's an urgent matter, we may look to email the coach direct and say, hey, look, I know you may not be able to respond right now, but the student or family is really concerned about this. If you have the time, would you please respond? If anything, I'll inform them that you'll get back to them no later than Monday, Tuesday. But again, there isn't a limitation on how many times a student can reach out to the coach. We want to make sure that we are assisting the students as needed, so there aren't any limitations. Can the consultant directly contact the coach? You heard me say it just moments ago that, if there's a need for you to contact them, feel free to do so, especially when it's dealing with your student. However, please, if you don't have a student enrolled into our program, or the question you have doesn't pertain to the student assigned to that coach, please don't reach out to the coach and inquire about another student's situation when they're not enrolled to our program. Because what that does, it deters and takes away time from our coaches, or takes away time from the students our coaches are already assigned to. if you have questions related to a student that is not in our program, you're more than welcome to send an email to HIFE CPP, and we'll address it for you. But what we don't want consultants doing is asking coaches questions about students that aren't in the program, because then it's not fair to the students that are in the program. We're taking time away from them utilizing our coaches. So just be mindful of that. You can contact the coach, especially if it's pertaining to your student that's assigned to them. If you have any other questions not assigned to that coach, send an email directly to the CPP team at HIFE CPP. Excuse me. Can parents or students choose a coach for themselves? That's asked again quite a bit. We assign a coach based on an internal process. So I'm going to say the answer in short is no, you can't choose your coach. A coach is assigned to you according to the information you submit on the application. Our Dean of Education reviews every enrollment application and determines which coach would really be best suited for that student according to coach's time commitments, experience, the student's goals, et cetera, et cetera. That information is looked at on the application, and based on an internal process, our Dean of Education, Constance, she decides who is the best coach at that time. So there isn't, you can choose one because you heard of this coach, works with this student, and that's what you want. Now, I will say this, on occasion, maybe that could work, but in reality, our coaches are assigned based on our Dean of Education, okay? So just let them know that we do an internal process. We look at that. We want to make sure we match up the student with the best coach according to the information that you submit on the enrollment form. How many coaches are working with Heartland? Currently, we have approximately, and this number has been updated, it's now closer to 12 to 15 coaches that are actively working with our students. We do have additional coaches that are on reserve, and they're ready to work with students as a need increases in terms of enrollments if it warrants our services. But a lot of our coaches, they have the ability, and I'll address this question here. I think it's the next question. All our coaches have the ability to work anywhere between 75 to 100 students. You know, you've seen this statistic from me before. They say a counselor shouldn't have more than 250 students at any given time. Our coaches can work anywhere from 200 to 300 students at any given time. However, on average, they have anywhere from 75 to 100. Some of them even only want to have about 50 a year, 30 a year. It's just dependent on their workload. And so our Dean of Education looks at that. So going back to selecting a coach, you know, if a coach says, you know, I only really want about 40, 50 students, that we're not going to assign them any more students because we want to make sure equally their students are taken care of according to the workload and commitment that the coach can give to those students. So what you'll see is what's the maximum number of students per coach. It's going to vary per coach. Again, on average, it's between 75 to 100. Some coaches have more, some have less. But as I said, each coach possesses the ability to handle anywhere from 200 to 350 students. But we always look at the workload. We want to make sure that it's not overwhelming the coach, that they're still going to be responsive in regards to responding to emails, making sure it's in a timely manner. So those things are constantly being reviewed. And then in some cases, you know, there are some coaches that maybe they have some family issues or medical issues, or they're limited just through certain areas that we'll look to make sure that they're not overworked, because we want to make sure that we're giving the right amount of commitment to our students. And so these are things that are being constantly looked at. Do the coaches collaborate with each other in supporting students? All our coaches actually work together. The great thing about our coaches is, you know, it's like a think tank. So you get assigned one coach, but in reality, you actually have all our coaches in terms of their experience or expertise, because many of our coaches actually collaborate together. They talk and they discuss, they share different ideas, what's working with their students. So you have one assigned coach, but you really have the experience and expertise of all our coaches. So that's the great thing. And our coaches meet on a regular basis, anywhere from 45 to 60 days, and they're constantly sharing ideas. They go through webinars with each other. And so, yes, our coaches do collaborate, especially when it's necessary or it's in benefit of our students. We want to make sure that we're giving them the best of the best. And so some coaches have great ideas that our other coaches can benefit from as well. Okay. And then if the family is not satisfied with a coach who has been assigned to them, can they request for a change in coach? Under normal circumstances, the answer is going to be no. However, we have done it in some cases. Under normal circumstances, we want to minimize coach changes as much as possible. But during these rare and unique situations, we could look to approve a change in coach. Now, before we do that, it's extensively looked at. Heartland, the HIFE team is going to see what has happened, why things are where they're at in that situation, and try to identify, is it a communication breakdown? Is there something that had happened? But a lot of times what we find is when there is an issue or a family wants to get reassigned a coach, the issue isn't the coach. So I want to be clear with that. Issue isn't the coach. More so it is an issue with the communication from the student to the coach. And so we want to address that, because if we sign them a new coach and yet they still don't communicate with the coach, or they're not actively involved in the process, changing a coach won't change the results if the student isn't engaged and willing to work. And so we'll do our very best to provide a very positive outcome for all parties. But on occasion, again, we'll look to satisfy the family as much as possible. But again, under normal circumstances, we won't change coaches. So we'll just have to look at it. All right. Now, regarding like sponsorships is the last section that I'll cover for FAQs. Regarding sponsorships, okay, or advertisement, can you create your own invitation flyer for HIFE College or HIFE Education Planning? All of the approved material that we have is going to be located on the team site. Now, we're going through some revisions. We're making some changes because we're at the end of the year. We look to do that. So you'll see things updated throughout the next couple weeks or so. Just make sure you're reviewing or you have the most updated information. And normally towards this time of year, at the end of the year, we go through some revisions. If anything, we update things, and there's slight updates, and you'll know if they're updated because you look at the versions, you see which date is most recent, and that's how you know you have the most recent version, okay? Now, if there's something on the team site that is not available, or you want to create your own thing, you're more than welcome to do so. You can create your own flyer if what's out there you don't like, or you want to try something else and you want to make it simple, and whatever it is that you like. All we ask is that you actually send it to the HIFE sponsorship team for approval, and request for them to review the information. If they like it, they'll approve it, and then you can utilize it. But before you create anything, get it approved first. You know, they say so you want to just make sure that you get permission first before you ask for forgiveness. Okay, so get permission first and find out whether or not they'll approve it. And I'll say this much: I've seen so many different offices use different flyers. They've gotten it approved with ease. So if you have something you like, feel free to send it to the sponsorship team to get it approved. Are you allowed to market HIFE College Planning in radio, newspapers, magazines? The answer is yes. However, again, you got to submit a request for approval. Again, to submit that request for approval, go to the team site. On the far right-hand side, there'll be forms and links. It will say HIFE sponsorship advertisement link. So click on that link and submit your request, and then we'll look to approve it. So be mindful, whatever you're doing that's not already in the team site, what you need to do is get approval first, okay? Just make sure you're getting approval. Cover yourself. Make sure you're in compliance with the HIFE team, okay? Do you need approval to host monthly CPMs? So if you're doing a college planning meeting at your office or at your home, you don't need approval. The only time you're going to need approval is when you do outside your home or your office. So if you're doing it like in a hotel, you're doing an event, and you're using other literature, other advertisements or flyers that is not approved, get it approved first, okay? Make sure that you're doing that. And I know many of you are writing questions in the chat line. I'll address those here momentarily as I'm finishing up. Do I need HIFE approval prior to conducting a presentation at an organization, such as a school, library, church, association? The answer is yes. Anytime you are presenting to an association, office, organization, company, whatever it is, outside of your own current office, you need to get approval. We need to make sure that we understand that you're there just in case if anything happens, or if the contact person at that event or that association reaches out to the institute, we know who to refer it right back to. So make sure that you get approval anytime that you're presenting in an organization, library, school, church, a company, anything like that. Make sure that you get approval first. So if anything comes up, we know who to contact. So those are the questions on FAQs. I'm going to read through the chat line here fairly quickly and try to address any questions that were there. And then I will open it up to Q&As if you have any. Give me 1 second. There's a lot of questions. So one of the questions that came up, HIFE, can HIFE still help students currently in college to find scholarships and grants if they enroll in the program? The answer, as I mentioned earlier, is in short, yes. However, understand if they're in college and that is a primary reason why they're looking to enroll into our program is to find grants and scholarships, this program is not going to be a good fit for them. We can help them through that process, but remember the three main areas that we focus in on. We help assess the students identify a career path, which helps them pick out their education or major degree. And then we help them with the application planning process for college. And then third, searching for grants and scholarships that they can apply for. But by all means, that does not mean that we can guarantee they'll be awarded any monies. We can only help put them in a better position. Other question, what exactly CUTA can attract students for 3 to 5 hours a week? Seems very straightforward once they go. Very true. You know, what I find is this: if you've ever utilized CUTA and a student knows exactly what they want to do, or they have an idea what they want to do, CUTA actually is designed to help students explore their options and narrow it down. It's a career planning system. If you look at CUTA from beginning to end, and you look at each tab and you go through them for yourself, what you'll see towards the end, it's moving in the direction towards a career, towards a occupation. And so when you go through that process, it's helping the students really, really explore and see what's best according to their likes, their interests, their values, their skills. And that's what's missing in many students' lives. They don't have information at their fingertips that they can thoroughly research, compare, and then most importantly, they don't have an individual that's assigned to them that they can talk to about their thoughts about what they're seeing and what they're understanding. Just because you and I read something, you and I may have different understanding of what we read. Hence why I believe coaching is necessary, because what your students may interpret and understand or even comprehend may be different when explained by a coach. So if they can spend 3 to 5 hours in CUTA a week, we find studies show through CUTA, when they do their white paper studies, students that spend a certain amount of time utilizing CUTA, not only are they finding occupations that are better suited for them, but they get an occupations degrees that they end up being very successful in. But it's cutting down the time frame for them to graduate, meaning it's going from 6 to 4 to 5 years, because the students are well prepared and they understand what's necessary. Okay. How do we convince parents to look into our program if their main objection is they fully funded their kids' college? Okay, so I assume that if they've already fully funded their children's education, I mean, they have all the money, they don't need any more money. Well, our program isn't designed to find you money. Does that happen as a byproduct? The answer is yes. So the approach isn't, let's go find you more money if they already have money. And even if they don't have money, that's still not the approach. The approach is not, let's find you money, whether you have money or you don't have money. The approach is this, and it's very simple. I ask parents these questions all the time. And these, you may want to write this down, but these are the questions that I help parents understand our program. I ask them, are you worried about your son or daughter's career choices? Are you worried about what education or degree they choose? Are you worried about which college they're going to get into? Are you worried that it's going to be a best fit for your student, meaning that they're going to be able to excel, thrive, and graduate on time at that university? If you're worried based on any of those things that I asked you, then that's exactly what our coaching program addresses. It helps you relieve yourself of that worry, of that stress, because you have a coach that's going to help ensure that your son or daughters are getting into a best fit school according to your student. They're identifying the best fit degree, best fit major, and occupation that's defined based on your students. And so none of that has to do with money. It has everything to do with the end goal, which is most parents, if not all parents, they want to see their children get a higher education, but it's not the degree they want, it's the career that they want them to have. And so it's not a matter of convincing, it's a matter of portraying exactly what our program does. Our program helps them plan out their son or daughter's education and career future, meaning if they want to be an engineer, we put them on a pathway to become an engineer. Now, they may have their own pathway, but remember something. Their level of understanding of the educational system, both for parent and student, is not going to be as great as our coaches. So what they believe to be their pathway could possibly be much better with the experience of our coaches. It's like to say this, and I heard this example. This is probably the best example I can give you, is let's say you're here in Sacramento and you want to go to LA. Well, just geographically, you just go south. Well, going south will get you there some way, somehow, but there are many different roads to travel. Now, if you want to get there the fastest way, you put that thing in the GPS and it will tell you the fastest way based according to time, based on mileage, based if there's tolls, etc., traffic, and it'll keep adjusting. What our coaches do is like GPS. You have a starting point and an ending point. Our coaches is your GPS. They're your guided map to get you to your end destination. whether it's going to be the short road travel, the fastest time traveled, but as there's bumps along the way, as there's traffic along the way, our coaches will help you make adjustments. So that's the best way I can explain that. Hopefully that answers or address your question. Once a student is enrolled, what is our responsibility as a consultant to the family, and for how long? Well, they're just like any other client. Your responsibility is to ensure that their success. And when I say ensure success, no one's success is defined differently. You want to make sure that they are in the program, effectively using the program. Now, by all means, it's ultimately up to you. If you want to follow with them frequently, you can. If you don't, it's up to you. I can only recommend what we do. And what I tell our agents is when they're enrolled into the program, just spot checking up on them the first 60 days, about every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, is critical, because the first 30, 60 days can really determine the outlook the remaining of the year. Because if they get started on the wrong foot, it's hard to get back on the right track. So the first 30, 45 days is essential for you to contact them ongoing, just to make sure they're on the right track. Because remember, college planning for most people is a brand new thing. They've never heard of it, never thought of it. But when you share everything that we do, they recognize that it's needed. The problem is because it's not something they're familiar with, they're unaware of what should be done. And even as consultants, so you want to be actively communicating with them the first 45, 60 days. Thereafter, you want to communicate with them every other month or so. One of the ways I communicate with my clients on a regular basis, I send out the newsletter to them just so I can be in front of them. And so that's something you may want to do as well, is just send out them the newsletter every single month and just see how they're doing. And along with that, you want to be reviewing any of the communications the coaches send. And if there's any issues, you want to get involved, be a liaison between the coach and the family. Okay. The communication between the parents, students, coach through email, conference call, or in person. It's going to be predominantly email. And the reason why it's email is because that's what the Institute can hold accountable. If it's a phone call, it becomes a he said, she said. There may be some misinterpretations and misunderstanding. With email, there can be some misunderstanding, but at least with what's being said in an email, we can see it and we can actually explain it. However, I will say if a conference call, a Zoom, a webinar session is required, meaning they request it, they can request it at any time. They can. And so they can do that. But majority of the communications will be conducted via email. Regards to the ratio of 75 to 100 can be overwhelming. I would say yes if you have no experience. I would agree with you. Remember, the average educator today, a counselor, has 478 students, and nowhere near will we do that to one of our coaches. But the recommended amount for a counselor, for an educator, is not to have more than 250. And our coaches that are in our program, they're working either full-time with us or part-time, meaning they're semi-retired, so they have the ability to work with 75 to 100 students. And quite honestly, if a coach tells us they can only handle 50, we only give them 50. But there are some coaches that have more than that. And it's not a bad ratio. Matter of fact, 75 students to 100 per coach is actually a very decent ratio. And again, we look at every coach differently. Some coaches have less, some coaches have more. We just look on their current workload, how responsive they are, and how effective they are in communicating with our students. In our program, how many students enrolled? In this year alone, I believe and don't hold me to this because I don't hold the stats. That's something you can ask our Dean of Education. Over the last couple of years, we've averaged anywhere from 600 to 700, 800 students. And remember, not all our coaches stay in the program every single year. Some of them come in their senior year, junior year, so they stay in 1 year, 2 years. Some of them, it just depends on the situation. There are quite a few students, maybe not in comparison, but there are some numerous students that stay in 2-3 years, all the way from freshman to senior to their freshman year in college. But a lot of students that do come into our program, they're coming in their junior, senior year, so they're staying 1 year, 2 years, and so they drop out or they decide not to renew. So that number is constantly revolving. If you want more information regarding how many students, reach out to our Dean of Education, Constance Seiden, as she works with the coaches directly, and she's the one assigning students. She can address that in more detail. Okay, let's see here. Again, I'm trying to address all your questions in the limited time that we have. regarding two siblings that enroll into the program, if they enroll into the program, we typically will assign two different coaches. I believe it is better to have two different coaches because this way a sibling or, a student can feel that as if they have their own coach and they have someone that they can talk to that isn't working with their brother or their sister. I find that it to be more effective, but we do look at it on a case-by-case situation. There are some situations where it may make sense for the student to have the same coach because both students are looking to pursue the same profession, going to the same school. It may make sense. So that's something that our Dean of Education looks at and determines whether or not it should be a same coach or a different coach. But in most cases, they are different coaches. Do we have coaches out of state or just in Colorado? All our coaches are going to be in Colorado predominantly. We've tried to have some coaches out of state that were not or that were referred to us through some of the WFG associates. Unfortunately, that did not work out just because accountability issues. So at this current time, all our coaches are based in Denver, Colorado. If your prospects ask for some research with students already enrolled in this program, what do we have to say? So let me share this with you. Give me 1 second and I'll try to pull up. And again, we're running a little bit over time, so I want to try to address all your questions as I don't want to leave them unanswered. But one of the things that you can do is you can go to our team site. It's HIFEportal.org, and I'll pull it up here shortly so you can see this. Can you see the team site? If you can, just say yes or nod your head. You can? Okay, great. So if you wanted information to provide to your families, there's two things that you can provide as they have questions. You can provide them, if you go to the consultant team site, you click on consultant team site, you can provide them two things. One is you can provide them the FAQs so they can already get their own questions answered by reviewing it. So you can go right here, general FAQs, provide them that. It's similar to the FAQs I just covered. It helps answer the questions that you may not feel comfortable answering, and they just read it themselves. The other thing that you can do is if they're looking for actual results, is you can go to our 2016 HIFE College Planning Program at a glance. And this has some of the statistical data from 2015. And so what it shares is some of the dilemma. This is actually U.S. statistics versus our statistics, what is happening in our program. This here will be updated for so this was 2016. We're going to release one in January. It probably won't be available until we go to the WSB convention as we're compiling all that data to finish out 2016 school year, okay? So all of that will be listed here. So this is what you can provide your families. Now, both of this is available on the Canadian site and the US site. If you go to Canada, same thing. You click on Canadian team site, and what you'll see under the team site, you go under, give me 1 second. Right here, 2016, it's the same information, so you can pull that down as well, all right? And so that's what you can provide them in regards to information that they're looking to have, all right? And then same answering the question, what is the success rate of the students that have gone through the program? Look at the 2016 HIFE College Planning at a glance. That will give you that will answer your questions, all right? If the student is enrolled in the program, do they receive monthly newsletters? The monthly newsletter is actually distributed to the consultants. And so as consultants, this is where and the reason why we distribute to the consultants rather than to the families is because we want you to still be in communication with your families as they are actually your clients. And so one of the best ways to build that relationship is to communicate the newsletter with them. So we've trained our agents that as newsletters come out, just forward them the newsletter. Obviously, you need to adjust the newsletter or the email itself to pertain particularly to your client. But send it out to your clients that are in the program and let them know that this information is out there. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. It's just a way for you to be in front of your prospects or your clients that are currently in our program, okay? Our consultants CC the communication process. Yes, everything that a coach communicates to the family, they're CC'd, but I will say this, sometimes the students or parents don't CC you, they just hit reply versus reply all, so you may not see what's being communicated by the family. So as you enroll the students, it's highly recommended that you tell the family that as they look to communicate with a coach, please make sure that you're actually putting me on the email so that at any given time, if there's a question or something comes up and our coaches didn't respond or some issues, I can be involved. So just make sure you communicate that with the family as well. Yes. Last question. Okay. So as we conclude, do the student coach continue to work during the school breaks like summer? Absolutely. There's so much that's needed to be completed during the summer, during the spring breaks, that we can't have students just sitting around, lounging out, enjoying summertime. There's things that we actually recommend for students to do, whether it's volunteering, whether it is trying to find an internship, whether it is to take practice exams. There's so much that is involved in the coaching process that doesn't just pertain to the academic school year. It's throughout the whole entire year they're in the program. So we want to make sure that even during summer breaks, they're actively doing things to increase their student portfolio or their resume. And so we want to make sure that we're always adding to that. All right. Again, we're a little bit over time. So if there aren't any other questions, I tried to address all those questions that are in the chat line. If I missed something, send an email to HIFE CPP. Okay. If you want to enroll a student, how do you do that? You use the e-enrollment link. If you're a consultant, in the very first email that you would have received email instructions on how to enroll a student. If you don't have that, just send an email to hifacpp@hifa-usa.org, and we'll send you instructions on how to enroll a student. But you can find everything on the team side. The team side is, once you get on there, it's very easy to navigate through, in my opinion, if you just spend about a half hour seeing where everything is at. If you're on the team side, and I'll just show it to you here fairly quickly. The way you enroll a student is on the team side. If you're on the Canadian team side, you just go right here, forms and link, enroll form, right? E-enrollment form, click on that, it'll open up. If you're on the consultant team side, same thing, enrollment form, click on that, it'll open up and you submit the data. Now, there has been some changes recently to the enrollment form. We are no longer requiring, or I should say, we're only requiring sections 1 through 4 to be completed. That's all that we need at the initial stage of enrolling a student. If you decide to collect the other information, 5 through 10 or 5 through 11, depending on the enrollment form, it's all optional. Only 1 through 4 is what's actually required to submit the actual enrollment form, okay? Sections 1 through 4. Okay, I'm going to ask, no more questions. I'll ask the very last question, okay? Because I think that's a great question. What do you consider the biggest difference between regular school counselors and having a Heartland coach? I'll tell you this, okay? And as you go out there and you venture out and you start talking to students, not so much talk to counselors or parents, talk to the students. Ask the students, how frequent is it that you see your counselor? And when you see them, how often is it in regards to preparing you for college, applying for college? What they'll tell you more times than not, when they see their counselor, is through a duration of 5 to 10 minutes, and it's to pick classes for the next semester. It has nothing to do with preparation for college. And whether that's a good or bad thing, the reality is this: we put our students into these educational systems with the intent to graduate high school, to go into college, but there isn't a system to help them enter college successfully. And why I say that is because if you look at the national average here in the U.S., 67 to 68% of the students that graduate high school go to college. Amongst those that go to college, almost half of them are entered in remedial classes. That means they're not even taking college level courses. So to me, knowing those things are happening, that's the problem. And so our coaches, they address that. They're making sure as these students enter college, they're not in that situation where that they're taking these remedial classes, because remedial classes, what it translates to is more money to the families, more costs, unnecessary classes, in my opinion, if they were addressed properly in high school. Now, knowing that's all that's happening, your market may be in a situation where their school takes care of their kids. If that's the case, then my best approach would be is this, or my best response to that would be similar to like when your students play a sport or a musical instrument. They may play for the school team, they may play for the school band, but for them to get better and to excel, you don't just rely on the coach from the team at the school or the music teacher at the school to help them improve. You get them after hours help. You get them a personal coach to help them refine themselves in that sport or in that musical instrument. Same thing applies, in my opinion, with academics. Why aren't we looking for someone to help our kids academically excel and get them a personal coach? But almost in every other facet of our students' lives, they want to get them a coach, whether it's for sports, whether it's for music. They want them to get something in addition. They're banking on using that as a way to help them get that scholarship money. when in reality, it is very difficult to get those types of scholarship money for those areas. So what we need to do is educate our families that we can't control costs. We can somewhat manage it by making sure our students graduate on time, finding the right fit career, the right fit degree, getting the right fit college so that they're not wasting time. Regarding Canada, I don't know. I'm sure it is because bowling is a worldwide sport. There's many bowlers that are out there. It's something that has to be actively searched. Same thing with wrestling. Okay, there is a lot of information that's out there for scholarships. This is why coaching is critical, because as you have these questions, your parents will have the same questions. If they don't have someone actively searching this, researching, and seeing what's out there, it's a very overwhelming task. The only reason why I find that I was successful with this student is because some of you know my story. My niece, she bowls. And today she's about, I think she's 10 going 11. She has almost $9,000 in scholarship money. Her younger brother, my nephew, he's 6, 7 years old. He's about almost 5,000. But that's stuff that we actively research. And that required me to do a lot of fact finding, looking at colleges, seeing which colleges. Now, for my nephew, he may not, it's easier for my niece to get a scholarship, an athletic scholarship for bowling than it is for my nephew, because the monies that are out there is a lot greater for female athletes in that sport than it is for men. So that's stuff that we have to actively research. But now they're young. That could change over time. I don't know what's going to happen in the next decade, but that's something that we're constantly looking at. Now, if you're in our program, that's what our coaches will look to as well. They'll look to research that stuff to make sure you're aware. Okay. So I know I answered more than the last question. We are over time by about 10 minutes or so. I do want to thank everybody for taking the time to be on here. Hopefully today was helpful for you to understand our program and at least some of the basic information you should be aware of. If you're unfamiliar with the FAQs, you can download them yourself. Just review them. It gives you at least that bit of knowledge to better equip yourself. Okay. So I'm going to conclude today's call. I know, please stop writing questions because I feel bad if I don't answer. Okay. So last one, do scholarships affect FAFSA? The answer in short is yes and no. It's just going to depend. And that's something that, again, going back to our coaches, they'll review. Because some scholarships will reduce some of your potential aid from FAFSA. So it's going to depend. All right. Other than that, thank you so much for taking the time to be on today's webinar. All of you had great questions. I appreciate you for staying on a little bit over time as we address those questions. We look forward to talking to you soon. If you're a new consultant or even older one, participate in next week's webinar. It's on Thursday, held at 7 p.m. Central Time. It's going to be an essential call where we're going to talk about more in detail about our website, on what you can access, what materials you should use to get yourself started. So if you're just getting back into it or you still haven't figured it out, participate, because there's some things that you can learn from. As you can see, a lot of people ask questions and maybe there's something that's asked that you can learn from. So if you have the time, participate next Thursday, 7 p.m. Reminder will go out Wednesday and Thursday just so that everybody's aware. All right. Take care. Have a great day and a great weekend. Be safe. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks.